there, everyone, and welcome to another video. I'm Cassandra from CassandraTyndall.com, and today I would like to share some of my ideas and thoughts around the upcoming lunar or full moon eclipse in Scorpio that takes place. If you're in the Northern Hemisphere, it's going to be Friday the 5th of May. And if you are here down under, like I am in Australia, in the Southern Hemispheres, it's going to be May 6th. So that eclipse happens then, and it falls at 14 degrees of Scorpio along the south node. So what I want to do in this video is kind of just give you some insight to perhaps how it's going to feel, what the astrological signatures are that sort of lead me to those ideas, and also some tips on how you can work with the energy. Before I get there, though, what I really want to do too is just take a moment, just a quick minute to share with you June 7, so about a month from now, my next cohort of the Contemporary Astrology Program opens. So the enrollment has already begun, and it's a 1-year in-depth tour into astrology. So it's part 1 of 2 years. So it's year 1 where we go through houses, planets, signs, aspects. We do fixed stars, solar lunar cycles, and chart synthesis, putting it all together. So by the end of the, it's about 8 months in real time, but I call it a year. By the end of that, you will have a really solid, not only a really solid foundational basis and knowledge of astrology, but most importantly, how to use it, actually do astrology. And that's one of the biggest positive feedbacks I get from my clients and students, is that they do have the confidence and the know-how to actually give readings when they work with me. So I'll pop a link in the show notes below that will take you to the enrollment page. There's some frequently asked questions and all of that sort of stuff and more information, and it guides you to the app where all of the course content is stored. So of course, if you have any questions, you can either message me through my website, leave a comment in the thingies below those comments. Okay, so the eclipse in Scorpio. Now, one great thing about this eclipse, it is the last one in the sign of Scorpio that we're going to see for about a decade. So this is a really positive thing. So this is going to be an eclipse that's going to be about tying up loose ends, finalizing, maybe some reflection, to events, situations, or circumstances that may have first sort of reared their head around November 2021. That was when we had the first eclipse in this eclipse sort of cycle in the signs of Taurus, Scorpio. So we had a lunar eclipse in November 21, that was in Taurus. And then by January 2022, we had those nodes officially moved into Taurus and Scorpio, which sort of begun the eclipse season. We do have one more eclipse in this Taurus-Scorpio axis. That is October 29. And yes, it's not in Scorpio, but it will still activate the house topics that Taurus, Scorpio, speak to in your own birth chart. But one good thing is the fact that we are looking at an eclipse in the sign of the moon's fall. This is the last sort of, eclipse of kind of really purging, cleansing, and purifying. So there is something that is a little bit like the last leg of a marathon, or just this one last sort of cathartic experience that might be required in order to finally perhaps sever ties with something, make peace with something, or move on from something. So the full moon itself is usually a period of time each month that can be a little bit more tender, a little bit more emotional, a little bit more, if you think about the word lunar and the word lunatic, there's a less logical or rational approach. When the moon is full, it's more about being guided by instincts and feelings, even if it doesn't make that logical sense. So when we're talking about a full moon in Scorpio, which is technically in the moon's fall, we could look at that as perhaps fallen emotions, maybe hidden emotions, or some of the emotions that we'd, rather not see, rather not face, or rather not feel. So there is a little bit of an uncomfortable experience with the full moons in Scorpio. And of course, being an eclipse, that becomes, more intense or amplified. We might feel some, I think you probably know I'm a big Metallica fan. And there's this song where it's like it's a rising tide pushing to the other side. And so sometimes those emotions, those deep, salty, spicy, or painful emotions, they do feel like that. They feel like this tide that comes in and can wash over you. And you're like, oh, shit, this old chestnut, how did I get back here? Okay, so that could be a potentiality there. The full moon might, really reflect light onto some components within ourselves, a situation, an event that we, may not always see, or sometimes would rather not see. It's also with the South Node. Okay, so the South Node astrologically is usually linked to some ideas around loss, endings, releasing, purification, cleanse, detox. It's less about kind of material gain and ambition or hunger, but more about the idea of turning away from that. Now, when people hear those words, it's like, oh, like endings, release, and loss. The Western mindset generally isn't particularly comfortable with those ideas, right? But I think about it, if you've ever tried to feed a toddler, if you have children, or you've tried to feed a small child, that age where when they are in the high chair and, you're trying to get the airplane in, come on, just one more. And they just like, no more. And I think it's really important to remember when we're talking about the South Node and the idea of release and letting go. Yes, it can speak to the idea of loss, but generally it's loss in something that we're already filled up with, or filled up by, or filled up from. Because remember, the South Node can only ever oppose the North Node. So the North Node will sort of show or demonstrate maybe where we're already filled, where we've had too much. And the South Node's like, right, my cup is full. I need to flow some out, or let something go, say no, or stop. So this might be emotions. Okay. So, talking about a Scorpio moon here, this might be something like an emotional situation, or feelings you just don't really want to face anymore. Like, I'm done with this, I can't do it again, type of thing. Remember that Scorpio's fixed. So when that line in the sand is kind of drawn, it's kind of drawn, right? So you might get to that point in this eclipse where you're just kind of done, and you don't really want to have to continually like grind over old things. So the South Node can also be really lightening. You can liken it to the feeling of having a really good haircut, and you just feel like lighter and brighter with a little bit of those, dead ends taken off, or just less weight that you're carrying. So sometimes, the process of that, whether it's like a detox or a purification process, this energy of the South Node can be really draining. You might decide, I'm going to do a detox, and that sounds all really great, but the process is generally not always sort of pretty. So what can be really helpful, particularly while the moon is in Scorpio, for the duration of the moon's transit in that sign, is to maybe eat a little bit less. I mean, that's a possibility. It's usually something I don't do, to be honest. So maybe it's or foods that are more nourishing or easy to digest or light. Maybe you want to spend more time by water. So whether that's, a bathtub, I do have intentions of spending more time on the beach in the eclipse weekend. Those sort of salty air and water and the negative ions can be very rejuvenating. And sometimes just putting your feet on the tide, you just feel the tide take things out and come wash back up. It just feels like it can really draw out negative energies or things that, you just want to release or let go of, throw it in the ocean type of thing. I did do a video last week about the Moon Mars conjunction in Cancer between these two eclipses, and how sometimes you can put those process the feelings, put them in a bottle and chuck them in the ocean. So the South Node is more about stillness. It's less ambitious, of course, less hungry than the North Node. And it's more like of a spiritual nature. So this is going to be a weekend where you may just want to reflect, rest, and not take too much in. And that could be food, alcohol, it could be social activity. It's just more about kind of being, rather than trying to pull things in. Now, another technical component to this eclipse is that its ruler, Mars in Scorpio, the moon in Scorpio is ruled by Mars in Cancer. So this is bringing in even more water into the eclipse signature. So the traditional ruling planet that the moon is in under a lunar eclipse is going to tell us so much more about what this is about. So Cancer is often linked to the idea of the past, those kind of traditions that speak to family, to kin, but more of the sentimental things. I know myself with my child, I'm constantly trying to say to him, let's clean up your room. Let's get some toys that you don't really want anymore, you don't play with, and we can give them some other kids, and then to other kids, charity, what have you. And then you've got space and room, for your birthday or Christmas, whatever the situation is, right? And then we'll pick something out and he'll have a look at it and he'll be like, oh, but my memories. He just has this, he's a Cancer, as I am. So, it's all about the memories. And so, but Mars in Cancer, it can also bring up uncomfortable memories too, feelings or sentiment that you might be carrying that might be a part of your memory, but it might also bring up energy that's not always comfortable or not always happy. I have done a video about some of the better or the more positive features of Mars in Cancer. So it's not always, a real bust just because it's in its sign of fall, as is the moon. So the moon is classed as fall in Scorpio. Mars is classed in fall in Cancer. So we've got this watery signature here where, even though these two planets do form, what's called reception to each other, they're in each other's signs, but ultimately what we've got here is a situation where we have the eclipsed sign, we have the eclipse ruler in conditions where they can't bring forth their best. So this might mean that, a situation is not at its best. Your feelings may not be at their best. Events, plans, or circumstances surrounding this eclipse are not at their best. This can make things unstable, a little bit, off balance or off kilter, and things are just not feeling like solid or stable, which is water. Water is not, it is not solid or stable. So with this watery signature, we're talking feelings, we're talking emotions. Also, the body is very, very important, particularly with such a strong moon vibe. And the moon is the planet that is the ruler of our bodies overall. So with such a watery, phlegmatic, potentially kind of sluggish and emotional, and, add a touch of chili there, a little bit, the very Marsy water we're talking about here, there's going to be some, perhaps, it's a word I don't like to use, but, triggers or activations of how we react or how we respond to things under this eclipse energy. When we face feelings or a situation or emotions that do make us uncomfortable or bring up old wounds or reactivate traumas or past memories that we may not really want to deal with anymore, how do we react to that? Do we react knee-jerk, or do we respond in a more of a thoughtful, thought out way? And I think, you know, feelings like, you know, when, you know, how do we respond or react to a situation when we're hurt, when we're dealing with negative feelings? You know, is it bitterness or resentment, or are we trying to maybe hold that space to understand more deeply, like, where is this actually coming from? Okay. It is a full moon. So, you know, sometimes relationship dynamics can really play out as the sun and moon are in perfect opposition to each other. Now, the idea of responsibility, you know, responsibility is your ability to respond. Okay. So, someone who is not responsible doesn't have the ability to respond to anything, or at least not in a way that ensures a favorable outcome. And this might be a little bit of the challenge with Saturn in Pisces, another water sign. Okay. So, Saturn went into Pisces back in March. And this is to remind us maybe that healing is our own responsibility. We can't, it can't be other people's. You know, obviously we can be guided and mentored by other people, whether it's our friends, our family, or even professional help. But this lunar eclipse for some of us may help remind us that there's still more healing to do. We all do, and it's a responsibility. Otherwise, what happens with all this kind of watery, emotional Mars vibes reminds me of the sort of phrase, if you don't take the responsibility to heal, then what happens is you are basically bleeding over all of the people who never cut you. So that's something to think about with that. Another feature that I want to bring up with this eclipse is the fact that it's at 14 degrees of Scorpio. And this is very close to a fixed star in the Bohemian series of stars called Alfeka. Now, I have to be a little bit biased because I think this could be maybe like one of my favorite fixed stars. Now, this star, it's called Alfeka, so that's Alphecca, and it is a very kind of Mars-Venus vibe, okay? And so one of the analogies for this is it's like a crown of thorns, and it is the brightest star of the northern crown, one of the brightest stars in the ecliptic, in the northern part. Now, funnily enough, someone's being crowned under this eclipse, so it's going to be an interesting vibe, but I'll leave those thoughts for another time. So the idea with this star is that there are blessings, but there's also a bane, you know, a blessings and a bane, or a cost and a curse. And interestingly enough, this star tends to help or pushes people to be able to accept both sides of the situation. You know, not just the negative or not just the positive, and that, you know, yin and yang, good and bad, light and dark, they're all part of the same, you know, the same coin. And as such, you know, for every flower, there may be a thorn. And probably one of the reasons why this star for me just holds such a sentiment, if you like, is that my grandfather, he actually had a Scorpio stellium, and he, when I was a kid, he used to grow rose gardens, and he would win, you know, those kind of council garden competitions. And so roses were a massive part of my childhood, because he'd take me out and, you know, I'd pick them and we'd plant them, and, you know, I could go on and on about that, but I won't. And so, yeah, you know, he had actually Venus conjoined this fixed star. And so obviously roses were a big part of his life and my life, with, you know, Venus in opposition to this. But he would often sort of say, oh, Cass, you have to take the good and the bad in life, or, you know, every rose has its thorns, or he'd give you a, you know, cut you a rose and he'd say, it's beautiful, Cassie, but be careful of those thorns. And so this eclipse may help you navigate that nuance. That sometimes we have to experience the thorny bits so we can actually enjoy the beauty and the unfoldment of a rose. I mean, I love those David Austin roses, you know, those like really kind of British English roses. So, you know, for that beautiful petaling and the unfolding and the wafting of that stunning fragrance. it's a bit thorny, the journey of that, right? Roses can be very, pest and diseased flower. So, they do take time and patience and tenderness, and you have to treat them in the right way for them to bring out their best. So this might be a great metaphor for the eclipse, whether you need to treat yourself with more tenderness under this upcoming weekend, or perhaps you need to be delicate around a situation, and maybe also to sort of avoid that kind of Scorpio component that can either cut and sever ties or hold on too long. It can kind of go either way, but the star Alfeka may remind us that with good is bad, with dark there's light, and that's just a part of it all. So I hope that that's given you a little bit of insight into what this eclipse may bring for you and what you can expect. Obviously, there's a whole lot more as a part of the chart, but I just wanted to kind of give you a few ideas of what you can expect in terms of energy, the feeling, as well as what you can do. And maybe the idea of a rose will be really beautiful remediation for this eclipse as well. Whether you can cut a rose from a garden, buy a bunch from a florist. I think the idea of a rose would be very, very healing as part of a ritual or a process to work through under this eclipse. So until next time, feel free to leave your comments, your eclipse experiences, your thoughts on this video in the comments below. If you're not a subscriber, please feel free to join me here. And of course, if you would like even more astrology than what I put on YouTube, the Golden Circle is available too. So that is my astrology membership where all the good stuff happens. And I'll pop a link down below for that as well. So everyone, be gentle with yourself with this eclipse. It's probably going to be a doozy, but buy some roses and you'll be fine. Okay, until next time.